Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest edition of the webinar series being held at Speeki. My name is Scott Lane, and I'm going to be leading the session for today. And so I will be talking for about 30 minutes or so. We try and keep these sessions as tight as possible so that we can give you the maximum amount of information in the shortest amount of time. For those of you that are new to the system, it is similar to all webinars. You will have the opportunity of asking questions, and I encourage you to do that throughout the session. There is a questions section on the right-hand side, and you're welcome to ask any questions. I will try and answer those questions throughout the 30-minute period. If I can't get through those questions during that period, then I will answer them offline to you individually, and we'll track you down. So firstly, again, welcome to the session. My name is Scott Lane. I'm the CEO of Speeki, and I'll be leading our session today, which is titled 10 Simple Steps, Turning Your Compliance Reporting System into a Huge Value Driver for the Business. The slides that I'll be walking through are in fact listed on the documents page, and we will make those available through the system, so you are welcome to get these slides. Of course, at any time, if you would like some follow-up at all on anything that we've said today, just reach out to myself or the team at Speeki, and we can easily get back to you and give you some more information. So there's no issues about that. So feel free to ask questions, and we will make sure that we finish at the 30-minute mark. So firstly, if we're thinking about value of a compliance reporting system, I think it's important always to define what really value means. And on the screen in front of you, I've tried to set out at least my perspective of what value really means to me. And the value proposition is always something that I look at from the perspective of the business. And often people will say that you should stand in the shoes of your business colleague when assessing the value of a compliance initiative. And I think they're wise words. I think even better perspective might be not only to stand in the shoes of your business teams, but to look at compliance through their eyes. And the difference between looking at something through your business colleagues' eyes versus standing in their shoes, I think, is that you get their perspective looking through their eyes, taking into account all the other things that are going on at that point in time. And so not just standing in their place, but actually standing as if you were them and looking through their eyes. And I think that taking that perspective makes it easier for us to assess what value is in the eyes of the business. So in many ways, I've tried to summarize what I think is value based on three basic topics. The first being, is there some financial value? Is there a financial value to the compliance initiative that we're working with? In this case, it's a compliance reporting system. So is there a financial value? Does it contribute towards our revenue goals, our new customer acquisition, reduce spending, enhancing profit? So very much financial goals of the business. And that's a clear value driver for pretty much any business person. The second is going to be corporate initiatives or corporate goals. So does the initiative, in this case, the compliance reporting system, does it make us more attractive to potential investors as part of our corporate governance initiatives or as part of our ESG requirements? Does it contribute to our insurance cost or the risk of our insurance policies? Does it assist us or add value to our reputation, to our stakeholders, and to our customers? So there's some corporate kind of value groupings where I've given some examples. And the third grouping that I like to look at is the people side. So does the initiative add value to people? the employees and our stakeholders by driving diversity or inclusion, openness, feedback, and obviously the non-retaliation. So before we can really think about what are the steps into making something valuable, I think it's always wise to stand back and say, well, what is actually value? How do we define value? So the first thing that I'd like to leave you with today is to think about value in terms of these three headings: the financial value of the initiative, the corporate value of the initiative, and the people value of the initiative. The second thing that I'd like to leave you with today is when you're assessing value of any compliance initiative, again, in this case, a compliance reporting system, think of that value by looking at the eyes or through the eyes of your business. So rather than standing in their shoes or thinking of what the value is to you as a compliance person, think of that value from the other side as if you're looking through the business eyes back at you. So two things that hopefully can lead you into a great opportunity of showing real value back to your business colleagues, a different way of looking at things. So now that we've assessed what sort of value really means in this context, I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer. I think when we talk about value, people think about that return on the investment, and they think about, how do I prove that value? You said, Scott, that we need to show the value of our compliance initiatives and that it relates to, for example, financial. So how do we prove that having a compliance reporting system or a particular compliance initiative, how do we prove that that actually adds value to that financial goal of adding customers or reducing cost? And my answer back is, firstly, I think there should be real attempt at defining value, but don't get caught up on it. I think it's important to try and measure that value, but I don't think that it's always possible to put a dollar value on some of these things. There is a softer value, which is not always a hard sort of dollar value. So granted, that is most likely the case in many of these. And if a value is not possible, think about it in terms of time savings or brand value, reputation value, where you may be able to put a dollar on it, but you may also be able to try and identify real savings through those soft sort of savings. I think it is important, though, to really think about how to measure these things, and if you can, then do so. And so a good example might be a hypothetical. So what I often say to people is, if you think about what's the cost of acquisition of a customer, and most businesses know what that is, or what's the cost of acquisition of an employee, of a recruitment. And so if, for example, we take the recruitment example and we say, what's the cost of recruitment? What's the time of recruitment? What is the likelihood of having to recruit people when we have compliance related issues? What's the typical impact of a compliance related issue? Losing staff, retraining staff, turnover of staff, hiring staff. Even that basic example of turnover of staff, we could put some numbers onto that. I mean, we could quite easily put numbers onto that. So there are a situation where numbers will really work, and there's a situation where the numbers could work, but you're going to require a little bit of creative accounting. And then there are going to be situations where it's just going to be too hard to do the numbers. But again, don't overthink that measuring of value, because I think it's really important to try and get numbers, but don't get hung up on it. So with those kind of disclaimers and resetting that kind of value definition, and then looking at the way to measure some of that value, let's look at the top 10. Now, certainly when we look at the top 10, and I'm going to walk them through fairly quickly, there was quite a lot of discussion as to the priorities, which is the number 1 and which is the number 10. I have intentionally not put them in order. And I've done that because every company is different and you're going to have different objectives. But what my hope is that at least out of these 10 elements surrounding a compliance hotline or a compliance reporting system, however you define it, or a whistleblower system, that there's one or two of these top 10 things that you're not doing, or maybe you've thought about it, but you haven't got around to implementing it yet. Hopefully there's one or two of these things that you can take away and you can really grow the program that you have by supplementing these two values. So again, success to me is that you one or two of these things might be something that you consider. So let's walk through them. So firstly, I really like having the compliance hotline. I'm going to call it that, lots of words, the compliance hotline. I like it being branded. And I've seen lots of brands over the years, some cryptic ones and some pretty basic descriptive ones. So I've seen the speak ups, the speak outs, the the branding around report line. There's been lots of branding given by many companies. I like the idea of a brand because it gives you the opportunity of making it very clear to people what it is about. And I think branding a program, whether it's a compliance hotline program or it's a due diligence program, I've seen clients brand it and be really successful at doing so. Ourselves at Speeki, obviously our brand is Speeki, but we also have Nicole. Nicole, for those of you who use the Speeki system, is our AI-driven digital assistant. So Nicole is in the background that receives some of the reports and does the translations, etc., and engages with the person. She's our digital assistant that we have built into Speeki. So people have looked at how do we leverage Nicole as part of our branding effort. So there are ways to brand your program, and I encourage you to do it, and to do it in a way that's not as descriptive as some, and try and think of ways to really brand the program. Adds a lot of value. Secondly, let's talk about communication. Now, when I've reviewed programs for clients, and I've looked at how do they work and are they effective, the communication of the program is always one of the weaker areas. And it starts off strong and then it dries down very quickly. And I think it's really important to establish a communications plan for the program and to continue with it and to keep it going. And so again, it's not a once a year thing. It's a continued reach out of communication. And we know that when we communicate things, we have to identify how do we communicate it, in what form we communicate it, where does that communication come from, and what is the medium or the media in which it is communicated. So are we doing this through an email, through the website, through a brochure, through a brand? How are we communicating the message? And that communication piece could be done with your marketing team, for example, who are experts at doing this. But I think once you establish the brand, then it's much easier to communicate because you've got a real substantive element that you can communicate. Now, thirdly, I've put here marketing. Now, marketing is a little different to, I think, communicating. Communicating is part of it. One of the challenges with marketing is that when I talk to people about how they market their program, they say, well, we tell people about it. And to use an analogy, think about a restaurant. When we have a restaurant conducting its marketing program, restaurants don't just send out their address. They don't send out their address and their telephone number. So considering a compliance hotline, what many companies do is they make people aware of the compliance hotline. They say, here is the compliance hotline. It may or may not have a name or a brand. And this is how you access it. Here's the numbers, here's the telephone numbers, etc. And people think that's marketing. Well, think about if you're a restaurant. How successful would that be if you send out the name of the restaurant and a telephone number? What you do when you market a restaurant is you're marketing the value of that, of attending that restaurant, the experience of the restaurant, the fact that you can get your family together, the fact that it is enjoyable, the fact that it has good reviews, that people have given a review or rating, that people have enjoyed their experience. They have learned something from it. It is value to them to go to that restaurant. There's pictures of people being happy because they've got together with their family, etc. So the point is, if you are going to market your program, sending out a document that says these are the call numbers, the numbers to dial in, or this is the app that you download for Speeki or whatever. Yeah, okay, that is true, but that's like giving out the name and address of a restaurant. So you've got to think more holistically about marketing. How do we market the value of using the compliance reporting system? And that's really what you've got to focus on. What's the value of this reporting system? How does this help our business? How does that help you as the individual? How does that help the company? And how does that help our financials to use the system? So these three things obviously relate: brand it, communicate it, and market it. So let's move on. The next three. Number 4, in order at least, is establishing trust. If you want the compliance reporting system to work, it needs to be trustworthy. And to be trustworthy means you need to really establish what the purpose of it is, the processes that you are going to use to receive issues, investigate issues, and to talk about the results. And by that, I mean the number one reason why I think these systems are not used as often as they should be is because I think that the real challenge is that people don't always trust the system that's behind. So they don't really understand why the way, or the way that the reports are done, or the way that they're investigated. They don't know what happens in the background. So they don't know who does the investigation, how is it done, will they be involved, how is it protecting confidentiality, how is it protecting privacy. It's a real challenge for a lot of people. They don't know what's happening, and so they don't have that trust yet. So people develop trust by having knowledge, and they develop that trust by having experience on the process, and by actually seeing results, seeing that it's a positive experience for people and that it works. So establishing that trust is really important for you to do in these programs. And it's one of the key messages that I would leave you with, is establishing that trust. And it takes time to establish trust. Number 5 and number 6 are pretty closely related, and so I'm going to cover them together. In the old world, we had a compliance reporting line, and it was meant to be this kind of system of last resort, the system that was used if you couldn't get anywhere else, you couldn't get any traction, you couldn't talk to your manager, you really had no other alternative than push the button and contact the compliance reporting system. I think that's a very 80s and 90s kind of approach, and I think now we need to be thinking differently. We need to be thinking that these systems are great opportunities for us to engage with our people. And by people, I mean our employees, but also a broader user base. So people that are in our supply chain, people that are in our partners. So I think it's a combined issue here where people can really leverage the value if they expand the user base into partners and suppliers, and that the issues that they can that they can be reported on are much broader than just the classic, corruption, harassment, but much broader issues. And I think in years gone by, companies have been very reticent at allowing too much into these systems. And I think that we need to do a better job at actually broadening the topics, getting people to talk, getting them to report, getting them to engage in the system, feeling more comfortable with it. And therefore, they'll build that trust. And therefore, they might actually report things which are more important at some stage. Does that mean that you need to manage more items? Yeah, it probably does. But not everything's going to require this, in-depth investigation. So I think this, with the education program, with the training, the marketing, establishing that trust, expanding that user base, which I think is absolutely key to suppliers and partners and other stakeholders, and making sure that the issues that you cover are a little broader and can cover more broader workplace issues, or gender equality issues, or harassment, discriminations, the classic kind of ethical integrity kind of questions, as well as some other questions as well. Broader community-based questions, or ESG-based questions, or questions that or reporting that people want to make, or observations people want to make about the company and its ESG activity, or something like that, would be a really valuable addition to this program. So what you want to do is create dialogue, and you want to be able to engage people, not just have this as a last ditch, push the button in an emergency kind of reporting system. I think those days are over, and I think we're moving into this new, more integrated lifestyle. So they're the top 6. The next 3 that I'm going to cover, I covered a little bit before. Number 7 is showing the results. People want to see that this thing actually works. They want to learn what the results are. They want to know how many calls come into the system, what are they like, and what happens? What have we learned from the system? So people need to see that the system, it exists, it plays a role in our company, it does something. We know what it does, we've measured it, and we're reporting out on it, and there's value to it. And that's all part of that establishing trust. So showing the results and talking about the results of the system, I think is really valuable. And by results, I'm talking more, not about, we had 10 calls this month, 12 calls the next month, 14 calls next. That's not really useful. What I'm talking about is real life examples of things that we've identified, or things that we've learned from, or feedback that has been given, or issues that have been raised, and how we went about reviewing them, investigating, and improving our systems. It doesn't mean you have to disclose confidential information. It doesn't mean you have to disclose private information. It doesn't mean you have to disclose things which are maybe privileged. Obviously, we need to take all those into account, but we need to find ways to really get that messaging out. Next question is creating easy access. And that's a real value. If it's too hard for people to use this thing, then they're not going to use it. And so we know now, and it's Speeky's fundamental view, that people are more likely to report things on the app on their phone. And that's just true. And it is true, and it's going to become more and more true as we go forward. So app first, mobile phone has to be the solution. And that's something that we find at Speeki, and that's why we're really app first in what we develop. You can do telephone, you can do all the traditional ways through the web, etc. But the app and mobile phone is key. So if your system doesn't do that, then I think it's missing a huge value driver. I also think that integrating this into the ESG initiatives is a huge issue and a huge value proposition. We all know that ESG is here to stay. Some people don't support it, but broadly speaking, ESG is here to stay. And compliance, the life of compliance is going to be far better inside the G in ESG than it will be outside. So in my view, finding a way to integrate ourselves and our initiatives around the compliance hotline and incorporate the ESG matters into our compliance reporting. So it's not about compliance reporting anymore. And indeed, Speeki itself, our product, talks about messaging rather than compliance reporting, because in our view, it's more about messaging. It's not it's about compliance, but it's about other things as well. So ESG might not be defined as compliance. It's more just it's more a social issue that's being raised. It may not be a compliance issue, but it might be an issue. So incorporating ESG into that, I think, is absolutely key. And one of the things that you will see from Speeki going forward is we will keep pushing the integration between compliance and the G in ESG. And we think it's absolutely key, and we think compliance is better off to be part of this monolithic thing called ESG than being outside of it. So again, number 7, talk about the results, establish that trust. Number 8, create easy access. And number 9, think about how to create the ESG connection by using the tools for ESG reporting as well. Now, the 10th thing, which is probably a general comment at the end, is think about the people. As we launch these systems and we put them in place, what I found over the years is that people tend to have a little bit of a checkbox kind of mentality in relation to these systems. Do we have it? Yes. Is it in place? Yes. Does it work? Yes. It works. You can call it the number. Someone picks up the phone or a digital assistant answers it, and it's all good. But I think what we need to do is really ask ourselves the question here about, is it adding value to the people? And remember, on the first slide, we talked about value and we talked about people. And so I want to come back and end the presentation talking about people. Is this adding value to the people? And by people, I'm talking about the workplace, the people inside the workplace. Is it adding value to them as an employee? Is it addressing issues that they have? Is it hearing their voices? Again, the words that we at Speeki use every day. These systems should be hearing all voices. Are the voices being heard? So is it helping people in the workplace? Secondly, is it helping to recruit people? Meaning, we want to be able to create an inclusive environment through these systems where people feel very comfortable talking about issues, very comfortable about reporting them, very comfortable about using the tools that we have. And that will create an environment where it's easier to attract people and to grow our talent through recruitment. It also helps our value system. It helps us create a set of values in the company that are open. We have open values, we have open communication, we listen to people, we hear all voices. We do a bunch of initiatives to try and drive our value proposition in the company. And that, I think, is a really important element that we shouldn't lose sight of. And finally, of course, is it helping people by hearing their voices, but not retaliating against them because we don't like that voice or we don't like what they say. So they're the things that I want to focus on to close today. We started out today talking about what's the value proposition of having a compliance reporting line. Then we talked a little bit about, once we establish that value, how do we measure that value? And we talked about whether or not it could be in dollar terms or softer terms. And then we went on to the top 10 ways. And if you could take one or two out of those top 10 ways and integrate that into your own program, I think that you will find a significant value in driving these programs. If I would leave you with one message, I think that if we finish on this slide, these programs are built to try and create a workforce, a workplace, and a set of stakeholders, so suppliers and partners, who feel comfortable to report things. Those things could be compliance things, or they could be semi-compliance things. And they feel comfortable doing that in a range of ways for which we need to provide them with that access. And they feel comfortable in doing so without fear of retaliation, in a way that the company will accept that report and that we will actually do something about it. And that the doing something is measured and that it's reported out, and that doing something contributes to the value of the organization as defined previously. So if we do all of those things, then this slide has to be a positive. We know that if we do what I've just described, that this slide has to create a better workplace where we can grow talent, hire talent, put a value proposition around that talent, and that could actually grow our workforce and grow our companies, because we've got a better engaged workforce. We're listening to people, we're acting on issues, and we can show the value of how we have improved the system as a result. So let me end there and again extend my thanks to all of you who've contributed to the set of slides, and certainly on the Speeki team who gave their feedback. If you are interested in looking at any of the Speeki solutions, let one of the team know. But the most important message I'd have for anyone today is to think about how your compliance reporting system works. Does it tick all of these boxes? And do you feel confident that you can prove the value of it when looking through the eyes of your business teams? Because that is really the test. If there are any questions coming up, I'm happy to answer those questions offline. So just ping me or ping one of the team. Thank you very much for contributing today, and thank you very much for dialing in. The next session will be marketed very shortly when we start talking about equality in the workplace and how we can address some of the inherent challenges that many organizations have around equality. And so that will be our next 30-minute webinar system, and that should go up very soon, if not already. And we look forward to having you invited and participating in one of those sessions. So thank you very much, everyone, and I appreciate your feedback. And that finishes the session. Take care. Bye-bye.